Hello, and welcome to Introduction to Literature. My name is C. Scott Satterwhite, and the theme for our class will be the Roaring Twenties. The 1920s is a fascinating era in American culture. Coming out of the Great War and the Spanish flu pandemic, Americans felt a new sense of freedom, politically, socially, and sexually. While famous for the fast living and wild parties, there is also known for intense racial violence and growing political movements. People challenged gender norms and racial stratifications as a new generation left the older crowd behind. And the music was jumping. Jazz was all the rage and blues was moving, traveling across the country as millions of African Americans fled racial terrorism in the South and sought refuge and work in the industrial North. A revolution was taking place in America, and literature was at the forefront. Writers that we'll study in this class: Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Zora Neale Hurston, Dorothy Parker, and Langston Hughes defined the generation. I chose this theme for our class for a number of reasons. First, I find the parallels striking between the 1920s and the 2020s, and I imagine you will too. As a historian, I wear multiple hats. I hate it when people say that history repeats itself, because it really doesn't. I do like the phrase, while history doesn't repeat itself, it sure does rhyme. As we move through the books, I think you'll hear the rhymes too. Second, this is one of the most quintessential groups of American writers in our literature. The cultural capital that you'll take away from knowing several of these authors will benefit you in numerous ways throughout your life. Hopefully, you'll become what F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote about in The Great Gatsby, the most limited of all specialists, the well-rounded person. In future years, you'll be surprised how useful this will be to you. And lastly, I chose this theme because I'm personally fascinated by the era and writers. I've selected a diverse group of authors who either wrote during or about the 1920s. The figures themselves have amazing and often tragic lives, but played a great role in how we view this era, as well as how we see ourselves as a country. About the class, we'll read several books, a bunch of short stories, some poetry, and at least one play. We'll also watch films, both from the era and about the era. My goal is to make this class as much of an immersion experience as possible. I'm so glad that you've chosen to take this class with me. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. And without any further ado, let the show begin.